Congressman, thank you for being here, sir.
Absolutely. Watching the election in New York City is just mind-boggling and crazy. And I'll quote Senator Fetterman. It's like Christmas in July for Republicans because when you look at London, you look at Paris, these socialists, these Marxists, these liberal policies have absolutely failed. I mean, we have the playbook, right? We've seen this. We've seen how this plays out. And you have the city of New York is going to get behind Zoran Little Mohammed, Mamrani or whatever his name is. I mean, come on, this is ridiculous. If you want to ruin your city, vote for this guy. If you want freedom, economic freedom, if you want prosperity, you've got to fight back against the liberal policies that put you in this place to begin with. And that path is with President Donald Trump and with Republicans.
Completely agreed. And that's the real danger here. You've got someone who's young, only 33 years old, seemingly kind of charismatic, well-spoken. He knows how to use social media, but he's a full-fledged communist. And everything he stands for could cripple that city. So I think people get caught up on the pageantry and the social media posts, but they lose sight of the bigger picture, how the policies will change their day-to-day living experience. Nobody wants to see people in New York City standing in bread lines. Okay, but that's what happens when you start having government controls in grocery stores. So we need to get very serious here about our ground game and supporting Adams because this could be the downfall of the Big Apple.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm going to go back to Europe. If you want to see what happens, you look at the communities where these types of policies have been implemented, what's happening. Anyone who can move out, moves out. Crime skyrockets. You literally have no-go zones for the police. And like you said, you have people standing in line. I mean, the guy wants to have government-owned grocery stores. You know what that does to every other grocery store? And so what you ought to do is remove those barriers to small business owners, remove these crazy permit processes where people are reselling permits and quite frankly, jacking up the price of everything in the city. Again, rent controls. And so if you own a rent-controlled building, you're suddenly not going to pay for upgrades and maintenance. The quality of that building goes down. People start moving out. The only people left are criminals. So we have a great American iconic city that if this guy wins, Little Muhammad, it will destroy this city for decades. And quite frankly, more New Yorkers will continue to move to Florida, to Tennessee, to Texas, where they can be free and have economic freedom.
It's so obvious, everything you're saying, sir. So I want to ask you, are you surprised a little bit by the fact that he actually upset Cuomo on Tuesday?
Well, given if you're a voter who's frustrated with the city and you see some of his commercials, maybe it makes sense. But I am stunned, quite frankly, because if you're really paying attention, if you know the basic thing about any sort of economics, you realize that every one of these policies, if he actually implements them, will fail miserably. Now, what does that do going forward? It probably flips New York red in the long term. But in the meantime, the New Yorkers in the city of New York are going to pay the price for the idiocracy of this guy. And again, he's a socialist, he's a Marxist, he's a communist, whatever you want to call him. But this is going to be a disaster for the city of New York.
It is. And so to your point there, I almost wonder, would it be better for a lot of people to say, you know what, let the guy win the race and support him because he will destroy the city and then people will realize the error of their thinking? Or should we go full force on the ground, knock doors, pound the pavement, and do everything possible to stop him in his tracks?
Well, you always fight on principle for freedom, for low taxes and less government. Okay. And you fight that fight and you force those conversations. And so, but I'll go back to what Senator Fetterman said. This is a gift for Republicans, not only in New York, but across the country, that this is the new face of the Democratic Party. AOC and this Mondani guy, if he wins in November, that's who they're going to lift up. Donald Trump won the popular vote, the Electoral College, every one of the battleground states, because people were tired of this nonsense. And again, Democrats here of late tend to be tone deaf. They veered left, and instead of correcting their mistakes, they're veering even further. I think that bodes well for Republicans in the midterms. I think it bodes well for Republicans in the next presidential race. However, this race does not bode well for the city of New York.
Congressman, I just want to know why. I mean, for everything you've said, clearly the policies, they don't work. You're going to fail people. But also, you just lost this election to Trump. Kamala Harris was the first candidate in nearly a century to not flip one single county. And their big takeaway from that is we need more people like Kamala Harris and maybe people even more radical than her. It defies logic to me.
Absolutely. Back in the day, there was the movie Escape from New York, where you had a violent city that was overrun with crime. That's about to happen, and suddenly that movie becomes true, or parts of that movie become true. So again, hopefully the city will wake up, recognize and realize their mistake, and will actually elect someone who can fix their city. But that being said, the other candidates in the race, whoever it's going to be, needs to recognize, listen to voters, put themselves out there on a limb. And what I mean by that is actually have policies and ideas that are going to fix what's broken. Yes. The permitting processes, and again, when you look at the largesse, when you look at the expenses that the average New Yorker is having to pay, it's because of woke liberal policies to begin with. And unfortunately, they're going the wrong direction.